The year is 2006, and Microsoft's Xbox 360 platform is still fresh on the market, heralding in a new generation of both hardware as well as games. Microsoft's out there looking for a big title to push to the forefront with heavy marketing to represent the next generation of gaming. And on November 7th, 2006, Gears of War 1 is released. The title is developed by Epic Games. It's the brainchild, really, of Cliff Bleszinski, with a ton of help also from Rod Ferguson and Tim Sweeney. It's a core cover-based shooter, right, with a heavy emphasis on this squad with some horror elements, and you're playing as humans battling against a horrific enemy known as the Locust. This title receives a ton of marketing and focus in the build-up. It appears at GDC, E3, and now the infamous Mad World trailer is released that really made this game, sold its dark tone, sold the heavy emotional weight of the title, and it's still considered one of the defining trailers of that generation of consoles to this day. Just like any game though, with a brand new IP, it's really uncertain. How is this going to sell? The game is getting a lot of attention. I'm sure Microsoft's feeling very strongly about it. Well, it's a huge seller right out of the gate, selling over 1 million units in its first 2 weeks of launch and over 3 million units within 10 weeks of launch. It's a massive start, especially for the Xbox brand, which was relatively small with the original Xbox. For the 360, this is a defining title early on in its life cycle and a huge seller for Epic Games. With Gears of War now firmly established as a majorly successful brand, the pressure is on for Epic Games to deliver a sequel that's not only bigger and better, but can push the franchise to new heights in sales. So on November 7th, 2008, 2 years after the original Gears of War release, Gears of War 2 is released for the Xbox 360. The game pushes the scope of the campaign substantially, a much larger roster of characters, bigger environments, more enemy variety, and huge expansions on the multiplayer and mechanics. It is a huge undertaking for Epic Games, and it is rewarded in sales. Over 2 million units are shipped opening weekend, over 3 million are sold opening month, and over 4 million in sales in the first 2 months. The franchise is an utter juggernaut now for Microsoft, and as of May 7th, 2009, Gears of War 2 crosses 5 million in sales, and the Gears of War franchise passes 11 million in sales, which means Gears of War 1 as of that point has now crossed 6 million sold. We are now looking at a brand that can compete with the likes of Halo for Microsoft's major first-party exclusive games. After two hugely successful entries in the franchise, Epic Games sets out to complete its trilogy with Gears of War 3. This will end up being the final Gears of War game developed 100% internally at Epic Games Studios. The title is marketed heavily with a very somber tone. The tagline is "Brothers to the End," and there is a lot of finality feeling in the marketing itself. Anticipation for the title is absolutely enormous among the fan base, and it hits over 1 million pre-orders. Its opening week, it sells over 3 million copies, propels the franchise to over $1 billion in sales, and finally, as of November 7th, 2012, 6 years after the original Gears of War was released, 19 million copies of the Gears of War franchise have been sold. The Gears trilogy is seen as an enormous success, both in terms of critically as well as financially, but the question now remains, after 3 hugely impressive games, 3 massive sellers, where does the franchise go next? Epic seems to be starting to position themselves away from it, testing themselves with other things, and the Gears, like I said, marketing was focused very heavily around being an ending. Is there a future for the Gears of War franchise after the trilogy concludes? Epic Games Studios is going through a fundamental shift as a company. Longtime veteran of the studio and the father of Gears of War, Cliff Bleszinski, leaves in 2012. The rest of the company is deep focused on creating a little game known as Fortnite. The question becomes, what is next for Gears of War? The answer comes from Polish developer People Can Fly, who are tasked with creating a prequel entry for the franchise. This title focused much more on Baird and Cole instead of Marcus and Dom. It's much more arcadey and loses a bit of its epic cinematic focus that the original trilogy had. On March 19th, 2013, Gears of War Judgment is released, and opening sales are significantly down from prior entries of the franchise. The game debuts at number 3 in US NPD, and while previous Gears of War games sold millions of copies in week 1, day 1, it takes Gears of War Judgment a full 5 months to cross 1 million sold in August of 2013. It's starting to look like that the excitement and the epic scale of Gears of War is rapidly fading. On January 27th, 2014, news is announced that will rock the entire industry. Microsoft has acquired the rights to the Gears of War IP and all previous Gears of War games from Epic for an undisclosed amount. Microsoft will task their brand new first-party studio known as Black Tusk with the creation of future Gears of War games. They also hire longtime veteran of Epic and the Gears of War franchise, Rod Ferguson, to lead Black Tusk in the future of Gears of War. Later on, Black Tusk will be rebranded as the Coalition. When asked why Epic sold Gears of War to Microsoft, Tim Sweeney noted that Gears of War 3 cost 4 to 5 times more to develop than Gears of War 1 did. He estimates that their version of Gears of War 4 would cost well over $100 million to create and could put the studio's future in jeopardy depending on how well it would sell. Remember, this is Epic prior to the massive success of Fortnite, so they don't have the kind of revenue to necessarily risk making a title of that sort of scale, especially after Gears of War Judgment sales semi-floundered. So now we're looking at a brand new future with Gears of War home at Microsoft and Rod Ferguson and the team at the Coalition creating the future of Gears of War. With a brand new studio now in charge of Gears of War, the question is, how do you get them started? How do you get them up to speed? And the answer, it seems, is to remaster the original Gears of War 1 for the Xbox One. That game is Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and it's the very first Gears game created by the Coalition. It's a massive overhaul of art and assets of the original game, and maybe most importantly, it helps the Coalition really get their heads around how to create a Gears game in terms of gameplay and visual design. The game is released on August 25th, 2015, 9 years after the original Gears of War. It gets generally favorable reviews, and it debuts number 1 in the UK during its launch week and debuts at number 3 in the US NPD during its launch month. Generally, for a remaster and remake of this style, sales are very positive. With Gears of War Ultimate Edition now complete, it's time for the Coalition to fully focus on the creation of their own Gears of War title, Gears of War 4. The game is set years after the original trilogy, and it stars Marcus's son JD as well as Kate and a large roster of other characters. The game is a return to form for the franchise for many of the fans. It focuses again on that epic cinematic scope that the original trilogy did, and for many it re-energizes the franchise. The game is released on October 11th, 2016 and debuts at number 3 in the US NPD during its launch month. With digital sales, the game goes on to definitely be a larger seller than Gears of War Judgment. Now, it doesn't quite hit the heights of Gears of War 3. From what we can see, numbers are harder to make out the further we get in time as publishers try to hide that information. But there's no doubt it's a much larger success than Gears of War Judgment. The game also crosses 6 million players as of August 17th, 2017, and it brings the franchise total up to 27 million copies sold as of October 6th, 2016. This is the last known number of sales for the entire Gears of War franchise, 27 million, an incredible achievement. The future of the Gears of War franchise seems incredibly bright after a short period of time where it was genuinely in jeopardy. With not one but multiple titles on the horizon, Gears 5, Gears Tactics, Gears Pop, it seems Microsoft's investment is as strong as ever. The Coalition are very much hitting their stride, and they seem to be good stewards of the franchise after what Epic created before them. Thank you everyone for watching the debut episode of A Sales History. I plan on doing these more and more in the future, covering the biggest franchises in gaming through a sales lens. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Follow me on Twitter at Benji-Sales if you do not already. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a bunch. This video was an enormous amount of work and investment on my part, and I learned so much doing it. Thank you everyone for watching. See you in the next video.